Some people are born to stand apart, to feel deeply in a world that only skims the surface. This quote perfectly encapsulates the childhood experience of a Sigma male, an existence that isn't just about growing up, but about enduring, observing, and questioning everything around him. It's a known fact that only 1 in 16 people have the rare and profound personality traits that define Sigmas. But imagine being a child with a mind wired to seek deeper meaning, forced into a world obsessed with shallow connections and trivialities. A Sigma male, even as a boy, isn't simply misunderstood. He's operating on a completely different wavelength, one where the ordinary seems alien and where his quiet strength threatens to unbalance the status quo. What follows are 10 brutally honest truths about Sigma males as children, tales of quiet defiance and extraordinary awareness, where isolation wasn't a choice but a default reality. Prepare to dive into the complexities of a childhood experience that was never typical, always extraordinary, and often painfully enlightening. Number 1, alien among mortals. From the earliest days, a Sigma male child never quite fit into the world around him. He observed people rather than joining them, not out of discomfort, but from an innate sense of separation. This detachment wasn't a learned behavior or a result of shyness. It was more like an instinct. He often felt as though he existed in a reality separate from everyone else's, a spectator observing life as it played out in front of him. While other kids ran and played with a carefree attitude, he stood back silently taking in every word, every action, and every nuance that others seemed to miss. This sense of alienation was more than feeling different. It was a deep-rooted awareness of things that other children couldn't comprehend. While they giggled over jokes or followed playground hierarchies without question, the Sigma boy was quietly dissecting the reasons behind these social rituals. He didn't lack the ability to socialize. He simply had no interest in superficial connections that seemed meaningless. Even when he tried to engage, the conversations felt hollow, almost as if he were forcing himself to perform in a world that wasn't built for someone like him. This sense of being an outsider wasn't painful as much as it was enlightening. The Sigma boy learned to find comfort in his own company, building a rich inner world of thoughts and observations. He didn't crave validation from others because he saw through the social games that most people played, even at a young age. His detachment was a quiet strength, a space where he could think freely and question everything around him. The world felt noisy and artificial, but his solitude allowed him to see life's intricate details, a rare gift he held on to even when it made him an enigma to those around him. Number 2, authority didn't intimidate them. From a young age, Sigma males have an uncanny ability to see through authority. Most children are easily intimidated by adults, teachers, parents, or anyone who projects power. But for a Sigma boy, that illusion of authority never held much weight. It wasn't that he was reckless or disrespectful, rather, he instinctively saw the flaws and vulnerabilities in people who tried to impose control. He recognized that authority figures weren't all-knowing, and he understood that power was often just an illusion held together by rules, expectations, and unspoken agreements. This awareness gave him a kind of quiet, unshakable confidence that puzzled and sometimes unsettled adults. When teachers raised their voices or when parents tried to establish dominance, the Sigma child's reaction wasn't one of fear. Instead, he would look at them calmly, sometimes with a disarming sense of understanding, as if he saw straight through their attempt to command respect. This wasn't an act of rebellion or arrogance, but an inborn realization that no one, not even adults, is perfect or infallible. He knew that people wielding authority were often driven by their own insecurities and struggles, and this insight made him hard to intimidate. Adults frequently mistook this attitude as defiance or a lack of obedience, but in reality, the Sigma boy was far from being a troublemaker. He simply couldn't bring himself to follow commands blindly or buy into power dynamics that seemed hollow. When he did choose to obey, it was because it made sense to him, not because he felt obligated to please or submit. His detachment from authority wasn't a rebellion. It was a deep, intuitive understanding that human beings, no matter how powerful they appeared, were just as flawed and human as he was. Number 3, friendships were calculated, not accidental. Friendships for a Sigma male child were never about convenience or fitting in. While most kids formed bonds based on proximity, common interests, or a shared classroom, a Sigma boy approached friendships differently. For him, relationships weren't casual or accidental. They were deliberate choices. He never felt the need to surround himself with people just for the sake of having company. Instead, he observed everyone from a distance, silently analyzing who they were at their core, what drove them, and whether they were worth letting into his guarded world. This careful selection process meant that his social circle, if he had one at all, was exceptionally small but incredibly meaningful. He wasn't interested in temporary alliances or friendships based on shallow exchanges. The Sigma child valued depth and authenticity, and he didn't waste time on relationships that couldn't offer those qualities. If he chose someone as a friend, it was because he saw a unique and genuine connection that went beyond typical childhood interactions. His friendships were based on an unspoken understanding, a silent agreement that they both saw the world differently and had minds that could match his. This often left him misunderstood by others. Kids who didn't make the cut viewed him as aloof or stuck up, but in reality he was just protecting his peace and energy. He found it exhausting to invest in people who thrived on drama or who played social games he couldn't care less about. So he remained selective, knowing that quality always mattered more than quantity. His friendships might have been rare, but they were deeply rooted. And for the Sigma child, that was more than enough. He preferred a world where his connections were few, but built on a foundation of trust and shared understanding that few others could ever comprehend. Number 4, an early sense of life's absurdity. From an early age, Sigma males developed a sense of life's inherent absurdity. While most kids found joy in make-believe games or dreamed about fantastical worlds where everything was magical, a Sigma boy felt something else. A persistent awareness of how strange the real world already was. Even as a child, he couldn't ignore the contradictions and senseless patterns in everyday life. It was as if he saw through the carefully constructed facade of society, and this understanding left him feeling distant from his peers. For a Sigma boy, rules often seemed arbitrary and adult expectations felt hollow. He couldn't help but question why people behaved in certain ways or why society operated under customs that didn't add up. It was baffling to him that so many people accepted things at face value and never questioned the logic behind them. He watched as people followed traditions, enforced norms, and even built their lives around beliefs that he could tell were held together by little more than blind acceptance. This acute awareness made life feel surreal, and he couldn't relate to the carefree attitudes of other children who seemed to find meaning and excitement in it all. This realization isolated him. In classrooms filled with laughter and playful chatter, he often sat alone, not because he couldn't socialize, but because the conversations and games felt trivial. He struggled to find genuine joy in make-believe scenarios when the reality around him was already puzzling enough. Adults often mistook his seriousness for a lack of imagination, but it was quite the opposite. He imagined plenty, except his imagination wandered toward deep questions about life, existence, and why people seemed so content living in a world that felt absurd to him. This profound sense of detachment stayed with him, shaping his outlook and setting him apart from an early age. Number 5, the painful price of awareness. Being acutely aware of everything happening around them was both a gift and a burden for Sigma males as children. Unlike their peers who could move through life blissfully unaware of unspoken tensions or hidden agendas, the Sigma boy couldn't help but notice. He picked up on the smallest shifts in a room, sensing discomfort, catching on to the words that weren't being said, and understanding the emotions people tried to hide. It was as though he was hyper-tuned to the undercurrents of life, seeing and feeling things that no one else seemed to register. This heightened awareness was a blessing in the sense that it made him deeply insightful. Even adults found it unsettling that he seemed to understand more than he should for his age. He could pick up on lies, hypocrisy, or the subtle manipulations people used, and it became clear to him how often people hid behind masks. But this ability was also an emotional burden, something most other kids never had to carry. The world wasn't an innocent playground, it was a complex, sometimes painful maze of human behavior that the Sigma child had to navigate with an understanding that most adults hadn't even reached. Because of this, the Sigma boy had to grow up emotionally far earlier than his peers. He couldn't engage in carefree play when he was constantly aware of dynamics that others missed. He became hypervigilant, often feeling like an old soul trapped in a young body, trying to make sense of adult complexities with a child's mind. This maturity set him apart, further isolating him in a world where innocence and oblivion were the norm. The price of his awareness was the inability to ever truly feel carefree, a sacrifice that left him wiser, yet more alone. Number 6, oversized empathy that felt like a curse. Despite the outward appearance of being detached and aloof, Sigma males as children carried an intense, oversized sense of empathy. Beneath their composed and often stoic demeanor, they were deeply affected by the emotions of those around them. They could sense when someone was hurting, feel the weight of a classmate's silent struggles, or notice the subtle sadness hidden behind a parent's smile. This level of hypersensitivity wasn't something they flaunted. In fact, they often worked hard to hide it. For a Sigma boy, admitting he felt so deeply was a risk he wasn't willing to take. The world he grew up in often seemed to value toughness over tenderness, and showing vulnerability was like painting a target on his back. He knew that if others discovered just how much he cared, it could be used against him. So he kept his empathy under lock and key, disguising his true feelings with a shield of indifference. His poker face became his armor, and he learned to navigate life by appearing unfazed even when he was quietly absorbing the emotional chaos around him. Yet the burden of carrying this empathy in silence took its toll. The Sigma boy often felt like he was carrying the weight of emotions that weren't even his, experiencing an inner turmoil that no one could see. It was exhausting, this constant struggle between wanting to help and needing to protect himself. While his peers could move on from conflicts or pain without a second thought, the Sigma child found himself haunted by memories and feelings he couldn't shake. His empathy made him compassionate, but it also made him vulnerable in a world where understanding and caring too much felt like both a gift and a curse. Number 7, constantly misunderstood by their peers. For Sigma males as children, the experience of being misunderstood ran deeper than simple loneliness. It was a frustration that clung to them, shaping how they interacted with the world. They often had complex ideas, unconventional perspectives, and thoughts that weren't easy to express or digest. When they tried to articulate these ideas to their peers, they were often met with blank stares or confused responses. It wasn't that they lacked the words to explain themselves. It was that what they saw and felt was so different from the norm that others couldn't relate. This misunderstanding wasn't just about intellectual concepts, but about the way they viewed life in general. While their classmates might be preoccupied with trends, social hierarchies, or shallow conversations, the Sigma boy's mind operated on a different wavelength. He could see the bigger picture or notice patterns that others overlooked, and he often found himself alone in his insights. Explaining his point of view felt like speaking a language no one else understood, a constant reminder of his uniqueness that was both a strength and a curse. Over time, the repeated experience of being misunderstood became exhausting. It was draining to constantly try to bridge a gap that seemed insurmountable. So the Sigma boy learned to retreat into solitude, not because he feared people, but because solitude was simpler, more peaceful, and free of the need to justify himself. In his own company, he could think freely without having to simplify or water down his thoughts for others. Loneliness wasn't what he hated most. It was the sense that even if he tried to connect, few would truly understand. So he embraced solitude, finding comfort in the quiet space where he could be himself without compromise or confusion. Number 8, a stoic tolerance for boredom. Sigma males as children developed an unusual, almost stoic tolerance for boredom. While most kids squirmed in their seats, fidgeted restlessly, or counted down the minutes until the end of a lesson, Sigma boys approached these moments differently. They understood early on that boredom wasn't something to fear or avoid. It was simply a part of life. With a mind that was always analyzing, questioning, and processing, they didn't expect the world to constantly entertain or engage them. They learned to sit quietly with their thoughts, using boredom as a training ground for their patience and resilience. In the classroom, this manifested as an almost Zen-like composure. While other children might have complained about repetitive assignments or uninspired lessons, the Sigma child sat in still acceptance, knowing that not every moment needed to be exciting. He saw these times as a test, an opportunity to cultivate inner discipline. It wasn't that he didn't crave more challenging or stimulating material, his sharp mind was often yearning for it, but he didn't let the lack of it frustrate him. Instead, he would often turn inward, exploring his own thoughts or observing the world around him with a quiet, detached interest. This early experience with boredom prepared the Sigma male for adulthood in a way few could appreciate. He became someone who didn't depend on external sources for motivation or amusement. He knew that life wouldn't always be filled with thrills or instant gratification, and he accepted that with a maturity well beyond his years. While others sought constant distraction, he had already mastered the art of self-containment. Boredom was never his enemy, it was just another state to be observed and tolerated, a subtle exercise in building mental strength for a future that he knew wouldn't always be filled with excitement. Number 9, a hunger for truth, not boredom. From a young age, Sigma males developed a relentless hunger for truth. They didn't want the sugar-coated version of reality that most adults offered to keep them protected or innocent. While other children might have accepted the comforting lies told by parents, teachers, or authority figures, the Sigma boy couldn't be satisfied with anything less than the raw, unfiltered truth. It wasn't a rebellion against authority or a desire to disrupt. It was simply that he saw no value in falsehoods when something deeper, more real, was within reach. This quest for truth was not about seeking to be rebellious or difficult. It was about understanding the world for what it truly was, not the version that people created to make things easier. As a child, the Sigma male often found himself asking questions that others wouldn't dare ask, questions about why things were the way they were, or why people behaved in certain ways. Adults, however, rarely had the answers he craved, and when they did speak, their answers often didn't satisfy him. They would offer platitudes, tell him things were just the way they were, or offer comforting lies to keep him from questioning too deeply. But for the Sigma child, these responses only heightened his desire for something more genuine. This hunger for truth led to a harsh realization. The adults around him often lied, not out of malice, but out of a desire to maintain control, compliance, or peace. They hid behind half-truths, embellishments, or simple fabrications, often more concerned with keeping order than with offering an honest perspective on life. For the Sigma boy, this was deeply disappointing. His idealism and curiosity met a world that seemed to be built on deception, and this shattered the illusion of a world where truth was honored. His quest for authenticity, however, never wavered. He learned early that the real world was rarely as comforting as the lies people told to keep it that way. Number 10, creativity that defied normal logic. While other children were content drawing simplistic houses, smiling suns, or stick figures in the sand, Sigma boys were already crafting intricate universes inside their minds, realms of possibility that defied the bounds of conventional thought. Where their peers stuck to what was familiar and safe, the Sigma child pushed the limits of imagination into uncharted territories. They didn't just dream, they built entire worlds, creating complex scenarios and futuristic ideas that even adults might have found hard to comprehend. To a teacher or a parent, this might have appeared as mere overthinking, a tendency to complicate things that others found simple. But for the Sigma boy, it wasn't overthinking. It was an essential process of discovery. Their minds operated on a level where abstract ideas, grand possibilities, and unconventional solutions were not just possible, they were the norm. They understood that the most profound insights didn't come from following the usual paths, but from thinking beyond the ordinary, reaching into places where no one else had dared to go. This creativity wasn't just a childhood pastime, it was the foundation for how they would approach life. While others would follow predictable paths and conform to the ideas handed down to them, the Sigma child instinctively knew that the most innovative breakthroughs and the greatest discoveries often came from defying logic, from thinking in ways that others couldn't imagine. The world of the Sigma child wasn't limited by societal expectations or the constraints of traditional education. In their mind, anything was possible, and they constantly explored those rich, unthinkable possibilities. Though others might have dismissed these creative explorations as fantasy or daydreaming, the Sigma child was laying the groundwork for a future where thinking differently wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. The world of a Sigma male as a child is one marked by solitude, misunderstood brilliance, and an intense hunger for truth. From an early age, they didn't conform to the expectations that society imposed on them. Instead, they navigated their own path, often feeling like outsiders but never feeling lost. They were the quiet observers, the ones whose minds operated on a different frequency, who saw the world as it was, raw, unfiltered, and often absurd. They questioned what others accepted without thought and sought truths that few were brave enough to acknowledge. In this world, boredom wasn't an enemy, but a silent teacher. The challenges of isolation weren't just burdens, they were the building blocks of inner strength and resilience. The Sigma male learned to thrive in a reality where most sought distractions, mastering the art of introspection where others sought external validation. He cultivated a deep understanding of self. What others saw as eccentricity or overthinking, he recognized as his unique way of tapping into the deepest potential of his mind. As children, they were already shaping the path of their future. They would grow into men who would question the status quo, innovate where others stagnated, and redefine success on their own terms. The journey was never easy, but for the Sigma male, the discomfort, the loneliness, and the struggle were all part of the grand design. They understood something most never would, that their difference was their greatest strength. In a world that demands conformity, Sigma males have always been and will always be the ones who refuse to be defined by anyone but themselves. If you found yourself nodding along and feeling that spark of recognition, then you're not alone. The Sigma male's journey is one that many can relate to, even if it's rarely understood. If you want to dive deeper into the mind of the Sigma, explore more truths, and uncover the hidden layers of strength and brilliance that come with walking a unique path, make sure to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll stay connected to a community of like-minded individuals who, like you, are looking for deeper insights and a fresh perspective. Don't miss out on the next chapter of this journey. Join us and keep exploring the extraordinary. I will see you in the next video.